Hello and hi to all. I am Korlley Emmanuel and we are going to talk about introduction to computer hardware. In this lesson, we're going to talk about computer hardware in general. So we stick to some particular areas when we talk about computer hardware. So the learning objectives will be in this learning what we supposed to discuss is the definition of computer hardware components, categories of computer hardware, input and output devices, processing device, and types of storage device. So to begin, we will start with what is computer hardware. When you say computer hardware, what comes in mind? So computer hardware in a personal computer, it is made up of multiple physical components which is constituted as a computer hardware. This means that in a personal computer, the physical components that can be seen and can be touched are the computer hardware. So let's take for example a desktop computer. The physical parts that we can see and can be touched. Example, we can name mouse, keyboard because they are all physical and it can be seen and can be touched. So it will boils on to computer hardware. So it refers to the physical components or parts of the computer that can be touched, seen, and picked up. So for example, when you take like mouse, we can see mouse and at the same time we can pick it up and you can touch it as well. So the computer hardware includes among other devices the monitor, the keyboard, the disk drives, mouse, and system unit. The example tells us that when you take for instance, for example, monitor, you can touch monitor, you can hold it, you can feel it, and so on and so forth. So it makes the monitor a computer hardware, the keyboard a computer hardware because it can be seen and it can be touched. The disk drive, that's the hard disk, it can be seen and it can be touched. The mouse too is a computer hardware, and the system unit too is a computer hardware. So in this, we are going to talk about computer hardware components. So in the computer hardware components, as we can see in the picture, we have the motherboard, the CPU, the keyboard, the mouse, the RAM, the monitor, the floppy drive, the CD-ROM drive, the hard disk drive, and the DVD drive. They all constitute the computer hardware components, as we can see clearly, as indicated by the picture there. So now we're going to talk about categories of computer hardware. Because we have so many examples of computer hardware, we have categorized them according to their groups. So there are four main types of computer hardware. Yeah, there are four main categories of computer hardware. Namely, we have the input device, we have the output device, we have the processing device, and the last one is the storage device. So we are going to take them one by one. So we first start with input device. When we talk about input device, what comes in your mind? So it tells us that the one that we use to input data into the computer. So as we can see clearly, the picture shows us an example. When you take, for example, keyboard, we use keyboard to input data into the computer by typing, and use the mouse to input data into the computer by clicking. So let's go into detail. So as the slide talks about input device, it says that input device is a computer equipment used to provide data and control signals to a computer system or an information processing system. So it tells us that the input device is used to provide the computer with data so that the CPU will process it into information. So it is the hardware that allows users to input data into the computer system. So basic input device consists of the keyboard. As we talk about the keyboard, we used to type data into the computer so that it will be processed. And we have the mouse that we used to click and do on the. We have the trackball. We have the touch screens. We have the mic that we use to input our voice into the computer, and we have the camera, etc. They are all examples of input devices. So we're going to talk about output device. As you can see, the picture shows examples of output devices, because when you take for instance a monitor, It's an output device because it displays the results of the data processed to us the viewers. So anything that gives us the outcome of a data, a processed data, is output device. So let's take into details what an output device is. So it tells us that output devices are computer hardware devices that present the results of processing in form of acceptable and usable by the recipient. So the keyboard, or for example, the keyboard, we use the keyboard to input data into the computer. So the results of the data that we input to be processed, it comes out as an output, and the device that brings out the output is the monitors, the printers, and the headphones and the speakers. So for example, when I input audio into the computer, it's the work of the speaker to present it out so that we can hear it. So let's do the examples of output device. We have monitor. The monitor displays the results, and the printers, what we print out, and the speaker, the sound that you hear. So we are going to talk about central processing unit, which is known as the CPU. So the CPU does a lot of work. When you input the data, it goes to the control unit, and the control unit sends it to the arithmetic logic unit. There is where the calculation starts, the plus and minus and the addition and subtraction. Yeah, and it comes down to the registers and the internal memory. Then we can see it out. Then we store it. So as we can see it clear from the picture, that you have the CPU, you have the input, you have the control unit, you have the arithmetic logic unit, you have the registers, you have the internal memory, you have the output, and you have the secondary storage. That's where we store our information. So the microprocessor consists of three sections. It is the first one is arithmetic logic unit. That's where calculations is done. And the second one is the registers. They perform the calculations. And the control unit, they control the activities of the CPU. So we are going to talk about storage device. What is storage device? A storage device are devices that temporarily or permanently store information and data to be processed. So for example, when you talk about RAM is a storage device because it holds information temporarily that will be needed by the computer. So when you talk about hard disk, it's a secondary device because it stores information permanently so that we can have it in case of future access. So they are categorized into primary and secondary storage device. The primary storage device or memory is a computer storage device that holds information temporarily. An example is RAM, because RAM holds information temporarily. Any information that the RAM holds and we don't install them into the computer hard disk, it will be lost when we restart the computer because it holds that information temporary. So that's why we categorize RAM as a temporary or a primary storage device. So we have the secondary storage device. It is the device that holds information permanently. So for example, hard disk, when you take a hard disk, when you store something on hard disk, we can access it anytime that we want. So it makes the information permanent. So storage device includes the RAM, the random access memory, yeah, that's RAM, the ROM, that read-only memory. We have the hard disk, the CD-ROMs, and all that you can talk about. So this was presented by Korlley, as I said earlier on. Thank you for this lesson. I hope I'll come back to you as soon as possible whenever I have meeting. Goodbye.